Okay, today we will be discussing various ways to monitor the status of your project within ProCloud, with an emphasis on how the project is performing financially and reviewing the progress of the design process in general. When analyzing in such a call it top-down manner, you'll obviously be reviewing information from a myriad of sources within your ProCloud. Now, as this discussion focuses on the tools used to analyze, I'll introduce such other topics and functions tangentially, but I will provide resources at the end of the discussion so you can get a much more detailed explanation on any topic of interest that arises. One area that I won't be discussing in this webinar is entering and reviewing of order tracking information, as such an involved topic really deserves its own webinar, which coincidentally we have under our project management course 4, order tracking, again on our YouTube channel at Design Manager Inc., which you can review at any time at your leisure. Also, I'm going to omit discussing the ProCloud item status codes today, as we have another webinar called Item Status Codes and the Project Schedule here, also on our YouTube channel. And again, half of this is devoted just to the item status codes. So again, you can view that at your leisure for as much information on that as you would like. Okay, now, the early stages of the design cycle and the project in general involve analyzing the status of a proposal or several proposals. Then as time progresses, we can kind of begin monitoring the project on a grander scale. Let's begin with monitoring proposals, and we'll start with the proposals and document window itself, which has a surprising amount of information if you really examine it closely. As I'm sure you know, you get to the proposal and document window, we go on our project tab, we go under our documents frame, and we click our proposals button. And I'll go ahead and pop in one of our projects as an example. And here we go. Here is our proposal and documents window for our Carter's Pennington home project. And let's take a moment to really see what information is truly available for us on this window, because I feel that it's often overlooked. So as we can see, we have all the proposal numbers starting with the most recent one first. Like most windows in Design Manager with the grid, you can sort and order by almost any of the columns. So I'm in reverse order with the newest proposal at the top, but by clicking the column heading for proposal number, I'm now going in ascending order, or 1 to 3, lowest to highest. Same with the date, name, what have you. So you can often sort in any manner that you like. Let's take a look at all the columns here. We said we already can see the document number, the date, the name or phase of the proposal itself, the status of the items on the proposal. Now, if all of the items have the same status as proposal 2 and 3 do, we can see exactly what status they are. If they are in varying stages of the design cycle, the status will say mixed. We can see the style of proposal used, the total amount proposed, including sales tax if applicable, the requested deposit amount, and the received deposit amount, which certainly can be different, as is in the case of proposal 3, the most recent client check number or payment method associated with the deposit, the date of that transaction. We can even see how much of the items on the proposal have been invoiced to date and how much of the deposit has either been applied or refunded. Now, when I refer to refunded, I'm talking about using Design Manager's advanced client returns and credits window, which is accessed on the accounting tab, clicking the returns and credits under the accounts receivable frame. And if I take a peek at one of our projects here, we could see the available deposit column. This is exactly the amount that I'm referring to being refunded. Okay, back to our window. Any deposit available, whether or not the proposal is inactive or complete, and even if we process a deposit, an additional deposit request, a version of the proposal as well, all of which is available for us right from here. I can easily set an item as inactive or complete just by clicking the checkbox if desired, and I can even change the entire status by right-clicking and selecting an appropriate status change as well, if so desired. Lots of information there. Finally, Like many grids or most grids in Design Manager, you can just right click and I could go ahead and export this information if I wanted to take it into Excel for some further analysis or for my own records or what have you. I can easily do so as well with a click of a mouse. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper on one of these proposals because there's an amazingly informative window that is surprisingly unknown to many users, and that's the proposal status window itself. Jump over to a different project for an example. How about we switch to the Carter's Brigantine Beach Home? And let's go ahead and take a look at their first proposal here. Now, for those of you who don't know, the proposal status is accessed by highlighting a proposal and clicking the status button in the bottom left corner on the toolbar. Now, this window immediately shows the subset of items from the project that are solely included on this proposal, and it really shows a wide variety of information pertaining to the items, particularly whether or not the item has been invoiced in full just by reviewing the color. When I come into this screen, any item in black, as the first three are invoiced in full, and even a little blurb or descriptive sentence on top of the grid shows us that. Any items in red are not invoiced in full. So after a little bit of experience, I can just go to my proposal status window and visually immediately indicate to myself what items are quote unquote complete or farther along the process and what still need to get invoiced to the client. Really helpful tool. Let's take a quick look at some of the columns listed for us here. Obviously, we have the location code and name, the reference number, and again, you can sort by any of the columns you'd like. Now I'm sorting in a descending order, highest to lowest, etc. The description, the status quantity, the estimated price of the item, and the sales tax, the total of those two. The requested deposit amount and the received deposit amount, the most recent check number associated with that deposit. Of the items that are invoiced, the invoiced amount, the invoice tax amount, and the total. I can see the most recent invoice number associated with the item, any application of the deposit that we received is shown, the invoice balance, and I can even see the payments received upon the item as well, and the most recent payment method or check number and balance due associated here as well. I can then see the deposit available, and I can even see the sales category code and name at the end. A tremendous amount of information, a really, really helpful window. And again, click of a mouse and I can export this as well. What else can we do here? I can easily change the status of all of the items on this proposal. If an emergency occurs, I might want to say, hey, this is critical for all items, and I can do so just using the update item status. So I don't have to go to each item on the specifications and change the status. I can do so globally for a particular proposal. Very handy. Our current view shows all that financial information, and it's a lot, and it's tremendously helpful. But I can narrow my focus down to more of the deposit aspect of the items, which is quite critical as they're beginning their progress through the design cycle, just by clicking the deposit view selection. And you can see a lot of the invoice information and some of the other additional columns are now removed, and we can focus solely on the price and sales tax totals, and then our deposit figures, the requested, received, applied amounts, and the deposit available. Very handy as we're watching the items go through requesting deposit, receiving deposit, and ultimately using those deposits on invoices. Further, I have a very powerful tool here where I can manually allocate received deposits. Now, with great power comes great responsibility. So now I'm going outside of Design Manager's normal checks and balances, but I could actually edit the deposit that I've received upon the arrowroot fabric and perhaps move that to the maple sleigh bed as a deposit. So you have a lot of power in here as well. I'll go ahead and cancel that. But a very powerful tool there for you, and you can see the total amounts received, allocated, and unallocated along the bottom to help you in that process. Now, all of the information here is also being correspondingly recorded on your item window as well. So let's take a peek here and jump over to our Carter project in our specifications. And if we look at our sleigh bed on the item window, another status tab, well, we can see the proposal that it was included upon, the date, received deposit, check, and check date, which corresponds exactly to our information on our proposal status as well. Because ProCloud is fully integrated, you can put faith in the program. And if the check information for a deposit is not listed on the item window like we just saw on the proposal status window, rest assured, it has not yet been recorded elsewhere throughout the program. So you don't need to go around asking questions if a deposit has been received or not. If it's been recorded through the accounting, it'll show on all of these very helpful status windows. Okay. Speaking of monitoring proposals, what's another tool to do so? How about some of the reports that we've crafted to do just that? Let's jump over to our project reports. And remember, it's always good practice to add reports that you find useful to your favorites area, so you can easily find them in the future and you don't have to hunt around through the literal hundreds of reports that we have. The first report we're going to focus on is our proposal listing, which is found under the project management reports, deeper into the order tracking folder, and I can see the proposal listing about 2/3 of the way down. If I have a tough time finding that, again, just click the add to favorites button and boom, it's now stored on my favorites menu. That is your favorites menu. For every user, you have your own custom array of favorite reports, so you can access the ones you need whenever you need to do so. Okay, now the proposal listing allows us to monitor what proposals have been created, approved, etc. Very much as a report or printed version of the proposal window that we just saw. So let's go ahead and take a look what's available for us here. First off, let's focus on the ranges. We have ranges for client, project, project manager, proposal dates, etc. Most reports in Design Manager offer you a multitude of different ranges to narrow the focus of the report. If you want to see the report run for all projects or all proposal dates or what have you, just leave those ranges blank. You only want to input a range when you're trying to narrow down the focus. Let's run the report and then we'll focus on some of the other options available for us. And there we go. Let's make this a little bit larger. Fantastic. So we have our proposal listing report. This is going to sort and subtotal first by project, so we can see the report headings, the subdivisions for each of the projects with all of their totals listed beneath them, and then each of the proposals within the given project. And we can see the proposal number, date, proposal name, the status, and again, very similar to the proposal window itself, the total price of the proposal, the sales tax, how much deposit we requested, what did we receive, and the total proposal amount as well. Very handy, very clean, very easy to absorb all of that information for us. Now, what other options are available for us on our proposal listing? First, we have the concept of the proposal status. We can do all proposals, or we can focus on active, complete, or inactive proposals. Basically, active is going to show us ongoing work that is currently in progress. If we look at completed proposals, those are the ones that have progressed all the way through the entire design process. And finally, inactive will be proposals that we designated as inactive as they were never initially approved. So if we go ahead and made one of our proposals complete, for example, let's mark proposal 3 as completed. Now, if we ran the report for completed proposals, there's our Anna's bedroom proposal for our Carter project. So you can see how you can focus only on particular proposals themselves. I'm going to switch that guide back to its original state. There we go. A very good example of how you can easily change the status for all items just by your proposal and document window. Another set of options are the proposal deposit selection. Well, I can do all proposals, but very conveniently and very informatively are the options for what proposals have no deposit received. Well, I want to see everything where I'm waiting for a deposit and why. I want to follow up with, I want to follow up with the client. Put that back to all, that's my fault. I want to see all the proposals that I have not yet received the deposit. In other words, my received deposit is 0. Why haven't the Hilsons gone ahead and improved the wine cellar? I can go ahead and try to expedite that process. Flip it around. Maybe I want to see everything that has a deposit received in a particular date range, for example. That way I can start furthering the items along through the design process, started making my purchase orders, all of those things. So now all the proposals listed do have a received deposit listed, of course. Both of those selections have great merit in my opinion. You can also show the client contact information if desired. By checking that option, I'll see the client, their phone number, the individual to contact, and even their email. That way I can print the report and see all that information in case I do need to send an email out or send get on the phone for a call as well. The formats available for us, we saw the by project. That's going to show each of the proposals sorted and subtotaled by project. You can also do so by project manager. This will be very similar, except that first we're going to break the report by project manager. So I'm only focusing and subtotaling first on the project manager for each of the various projects listed. So I could devise these or send these out to each of my project managers throughout the company. The final format is another very powerful tool within the program, again, often overlooked by many of our users, and that's the proposal contract analysis. This views the progress of the items included on the proposal essentially as a function of the portion that have been invoiced to the client. Basically, think of it as a percentage of completion of those items. This is great for working with the controller or the principal, as it's a very linear and easy to absorb format of how the proposal is progressing through the financial phases. So let's take a look at this. Here we go. Make that a little bit larger as well. In this case, again, I am sorting and subtotaling by project, and I'm going to list each proposal within the project, proposal number, date, and name. Then I can see the proposal price, the deposit received, the invoiced amount, and the percentage of invoice, or the amount of those items that have been invoiced in full. So I can see I've invoiced the exact amount of proposal 1, and even in some cases I've invoiced more if additional freight or other charges have come in there as well. And you can see each percentage represents how much of the invoicing has occurred so far. I can see the application of the deposits, the invoice balance, even payments on those invoices, and the current balance due. The last column shows us our cash flow, essentially, of the particular proposal. And what this is going to do, it's going to represent the proposal amount, less any deposit received, and less any invoice payments. Basically, how much funds do I still have to recoup, or what additional funds will be coming in the future if all things go as planned. So I'm basically counting on an additional $30,000 of funds coming in at some point once everything has been invoiced and the client has paid all the outstanding balances upon those invoices. So basically, future funds coming in can be easily discerned from this report as well. Great report. One of the ones that are a bit tucked away, but if you know about it, it's a great one to review on a timely basis with yourself and your other team members. Okay, well, that's proposals. What about items in other phases of the design cycle? In that case, I often use the report right above it the project order status. And this is an excellent report for internal use. I say internal use because there's going to be sensitive information in there, like the vendor cost and those types of things. So it really is an internal report. Let's see what options are available for us here. First off, again, we have a variety of different report formats. The full detail is going to show us as much information regarding finances, design progression, order information as possible. The summarized detail, a bit more streamlined review of the specification information, focusing a bit more on the financial aspect. And finally, the project summary, basically one line per project, again, focusing on profitability and cash flow. We have our variety of ranges here, client, location, project, etc. The ability to show the full description. By default, Design Manager is going to show 1 or 2 lines of description, but if you wanted to see the entire description, you could do so. Obviously, the report's going to be a bit longer in those cases. Then there's a few other options here as well. First, you can narrow the report down by your item status codes. If you just wanted to focus on everything ordered or needing to be invoiced, you could do so as well quite easily. By default, we're going to exclude completed items. We're really focusing on items that are progressing through the design cycle. The excluded ones have already achieved that goal. Certainly, I may want to look at that, particularly from a financial standpoint in certain circumstances, but by default, we do exclude those. And again, you can just turn it off or on as desired. Oh, and the, the in-progress items only. That selection is going to focus only on items where we've created a purchase order to a vendor, but not yet invoiced to the client. Basically, we're looking at items, we're going to exclude items where they haven't gone far enough to achieve the status of being ordered to the vendor, or have already been invoiced to the client and are nearing the end of their design cycle. So we're really focusing down on those items in the throes of the design process. Okay, now let's take a look at these reports. We'll start with the full details version. And again, an excellent overall informative version of the report. As we're going to see, it has financial, order tracking, and cash flow information. Let's narrow this down for a particular project. And here we go. Make this a bit larger. Excellent. So we can see our project listed at the top, and we're grouping and subtotaling by location. And first we see item information, and then we see individual component information beneath that. And I'll focus on one item and one component to go through what's available for us here. So we see the item number, the description, the proposal number of the item, the estimated cost, price, and tax all coming from our specifications window. The total estimate, of course, is going to be the price and the tax. Any deposit we've requested, how much has been invoiced. Payments, that's going to be both deposit received and payments on invoices summated together. The paid vendor, any deposits or vendor checks that we've sent to the vendor themselves will be listed. What we currently owe the vendor, and our net cash flow. This is going to be the payments we've received less anything we currently owe the vendor. It's going to be our net cash flow right here. Also on the owe vendor, this is a very intuitive column in the sense that it's looking at what we owe the vendor right now. I haven't paid the vendor anything, but I do have 50% deposits due on my Italian leather sofa, and I owe 100% on the freight itself. So it's using that as what I currently owe. Once those deposits are sent, or vendor invoices, it'll start calculating on what I'm going to ultimately owe the vendor. It's really up to date of what do I owe the vendor right now. Amazingly intuitive column. Beneath that, we have our the status of the item, of course, the color code status, and then our status description. If we take a moment to look in there, it's a tremendous amount of information. It shows the quantity and unit of measure, the date of the proposal, how much deposit did we receive, what's the check number and check date, what invoice number was it included on, and the date of that invoice, and for how much. Was a deposit applied? Sure was, yielding a balance due, and I can even see payments being recorded the check number of that payment and date, and even my AR balance. So if we take a second to absorb what's being presented for us, there's a tremendous amount of information available. Really just one-stop shopping for all of your financial and sort of order status information about the item itself. And the same goes for each of the components. So now we can see the component number, their description, cost, the purchase order number, the quantity ordered, the order date, vendor, and then some order tracking information. If we had a cut or cutting for approval date, expected ship date, receive date, deliver date, they'd all be available for us here. How much we paid the vendor, and again, how much we currently owe the vendor. We can see if we add those together, we come up with that total of $525. And any vendor invoice information will be listed along the back, specifically the vendor invoice date. And there's even status information for the components themselves as well. Who we ordered, what vendor we ordered it from, the shipping location, deposit required at this time, $350, as we can see. Tremendous amount of information listed there for us. If we scroll down a bit here, we can see that we do total for every location, all that information, and for the project itself. And down here, we even include any retainer information that may have come through. So you can use this report to show the actual fiscal cash receipts, including retainers, which are not item specific, included on this report as well. Very, very handy. Okay, that's the full details version. Let's take a look at the summarized summarized detail and compare the two. Again, lots of information. We're focusing really on our component information first now, as we can see, components 1 and 2 of item 2, and then the item information. Similar to the full details where we had the description, the component types are being listed for us, then all of our cost and pricing information, deposit requested and received, invoicing information to the client, including amount paid to the invoice amount to the client, any payments received from the client, deposit check number, and payment check numbers will be shown for us here as well. So we have the item information in 2/3 and then the component information in the following 2/3. So where we can see our vendor, quantity and unit of measure, purchase order number and date, and then the status information is in a single column, almost like a snapshot of everything that's occurred so far. Where has it gone? Is it ordered? Are we expecting a ship? Is the catalog number listed for us? Do we owe any money? Is there a deposit requested itself? Basically taking the long status line from the full details and shortening it into a summary version into the status column here. And then we can even see our estimated cost, deposit sent to the vendor, vendor invoice cost and payment information here as well. So first we have our item areas, then our component areas as well. Finally, the project summary version is basically going to be one line per project, sort of in the full detail format. Let's see what I mean by that. I'll clear out the project range here. Oops. So we can see everything. And there we go. And now, one line per project, estimated cost, estimated price, tax, total estimated to the client, how much we've requested, how much has been invoiced, payments received, how much we paid the vendor, how much we owe the vendor, and where we are on a cash basis. So in this case, we have lots of invoices out there. Once these payments start coming in, this value is going to flip dramatically. So great report to present to the project management principal, controller, what have you, where we're showing how the projects themselves are progressing through the design process. Have they been invoiced to the client? If so, where are the payments? How much money's been sent out to vendors, etc. Excellent view of the report to do so. Okay. Speaking of analyzing the project on a fiscal basis, let's review a few other ways of doing so in your Pro Cloud. Circling back to a few specific screens that allow us to do so. One such screen is the project status, which we access from our projects window and by clicking the status button along the bottom toolbar. Let's go ahead and use our Carter's Brigantine Beach Helm and jump over to our project status screen. This is an extremely convenient window in that it shows us an accurate and all-inclusive visualization of the financial standing of a project, at least from the client side for the most part. And we can see right away a wealth of consolidated information is available for us here. And let's break down this summary information first, as it's divided into 3 separate panes. First, we have our client deposits and retainers. How much deposit do we request? What retainers were received, actual cash receipts. Same with what deposits were received, the total of those 2 values, what has been currently applied on invoices, and the available amount. Just like that, all that information listed for you very easily. Next, the same goes for client invoices. What was invoiced to the client, including the sales tax, the total of those 2 values, the application of deposit or retainer, which of course should match the figure in the client deposit retainer frame, and it does, the subtotal, payments on those invoices, any of the more obscure client invoice adjustments will be listed here, so an accurate balance due can be portrayed. And we even have some vendor purchasing information. What purchase orders have been created for us, any outstanding vendor deposits, the future due of those 2 values, vendor invoices that have been entered so far, the application of any deposit, our total invoices, and our total payables to date. Amazing amount of information, one window on this on the project status screen. Very, very, very handy. Further, we can break down some of the information, including the client deposit retainers and client invoices, into their own tabs. So if we jump over here, now we can see all of our deposits that have been and retainers that have been recorded so far. And I can view only deposits and retainers available. So I can see all of the 2 deposits I've received, the retainer I've received, and the application of those values. And along the bottom, I can see what the amount of my retainer that's open or available, the open client deposits, how much has been used on invoices, and the available amount, again, which is going to match what we see on our front tab. If we turn off the show open available only, I'm actually now not showing the application of the deposit on the invoice, so we can see the total values that we've received, again, matching what we see on our first tab. Very conveniently from here is the Go To button. This allows me to select a particular transaction, the deposit on proposal 2, for example, click the Go To button, and it jumps me all the way over to my cash receipt window, positioned to that particular deposit that corresponds to what I see on my status window. Really convenient way to quickly get around through the software with just a click of a button. And the same goes for our client invoices. I can see both of the invoices that I've created. Now, in this case, I don't have any that are open or closed as they both have balance dues upon them. But I can see the invoices, how much was invoiced, the application of deposit, balance, any payments to date, the check number of that particular payment, and the current AR balance as well. Even if it was reversed or credited, I could see that listed for me here also. And the same, I have my information along the bottom, total of invoices, any amount deposit or retainer used, the balance, payments, and my current AR. And again, another handy Go To button. In this case, is going to jump me right over to my client invoices window, existing tab, positioned to invoice 10,005, where I could reprint, review, etc. Really quick ways to navigate the software as fast as possible. And that project status window, what that does is it empowers all of us, project managers, designers, etc., with information right at our fingertips. I might not even have the ability to jump over to the cash receipt window or even go to the existing client invoice window, but I can see all that information for me. Anytime that you can reduce unnecessary, call it inner office communication, or personal time spent searching for information, you have to take it. So windows like that provide a way to empower yourself to quickly get information about a particular project. Time is your most valuable asset in the design industry. The more you can save, the more you can design, the more money that you can make. And windows like that project status are a great way to do so. Let's move on to some of the most commonly used reports for monitoring our projects, particularly with a financial basis. Starting with perhaps the most commonly used, which is the profit analysis report. So we'll jump back to our project reports. We'll stay under our project management folder, and now we'll go down to our profit analysis report. Now this report is going to display the cost, pricing, and profitability basically on a specification level for all of your projects. And you can see here we have a myriad of different ranges available, so we could focus on a particular project or a proposal within a project or an invoice date range, you name it. Lots of ranges available for us here to focus on the profitability of various aspects of our project. We have several formats available for us as well. The default is detail by project, which is going to show each item within the project. And there's also a detail by manager that would do very similar, except it would page break and subtotal first by manager and then projects within each manager, giving the ability to print out the profit analysis for the project manager or designer associated with that particular project. These two detail versions are then within the project are sorted and subtotaled by whatever the sort by selection is: sales category, location, proposal number, invoice number, etc. So you can then determine how you want the items displayed or subtotaled within a particular project. Sales category and location being the most common of the five, pardon me. So now let's go ahead and run the report and see what information is available for us. Again, one of the classic design manager profitability reports and probably one of the most utilized ones in the software. And here's our profit analysis report. As we can see in the header information, we can see the client, we're sorting and subtotaling and page breaking by project, and then all the range information listed for us. And report, in my opinion, is quite simple, but there's a lot of information hidden in its simplicity. We can see first, I opted to sort by location, so all of our items are within their various locations and each of the locations are subtotaled. I can see the reference number, the description, and then I get into the real meat and potatoes of the report itself. First, we have an area for cost, and starting with our estimate cost. This is the cost that I have typed in to my specification window for each of the various items. And I have a corresponding one for price. My estimated price is what Design Manager has calculated the price to be based upon my markup or pricing settings or what I've typed in directly. Now, the actual cost, however, this is not typed in. This is calculated by the actual vendor invoices that I've recorded on purchase orders for this particular item. And we can see that in this case, my costs have come in a little higher than I originally anticipated. This leads me to a very important concept that comes up quite time and time again in my experience. I've often been asked, Brad, should I always go back to my specification and change my cost on my component window to match what the vendor charged? No. In my opinion, no. Why would you do that? The vendor you've received the vendor invoice, all right? Yes, it may be higher, it might be lower. By not changing the cost back on the component is when I can then evaluate why my cost isn't what I anticipated it to be. Further, it's redundant work. Design Manager is going to be tracking the cost from the vendor invoice separately. So then I can analyze it against what my anticipated or estimate cost would be. Plus, I don't need to spend the extra time putting that information back into the specifications. Let Design Manager do that work for you, plus give you the ability to analyze why your cost or profitability was higher or lower than you might have imagined. Okay. So now we can see our actual cost. Correspondingly, the actual price. This comes from the price I've truly charged the client via my client invoice. Again, it may be different than what I anticipated charging them. So not only does this window provide me the ability to track my cost, prices, and profitability, if I come in and I see that there's no actual cost listed, I can immediately tell myself that I have not yet recorded any vendor invoices for the goods in the wine cellar. Or if I have a actual price column that is blank, I know immediately that I have not invoiced the client for the items in the outdoor living area. When I get comfortable with this report, those things jump out at me immediately. Not just analyzing profitability now, I'm also getting an inherent status of how each of the various items are flowing through the design process. The next column, of course, would be our profitability, which is the difference between the estimate price and estimate cost and the actual price and actual cost. Then we have corresponding columns for our gross profit percentage for both estimate and actual, and our markup percentages as well. All of that's total by location, and then total on a project level, and finally, for all of the projects listed, all the way at the bottom as well. Fantastic report. Now, a few other options back on our profit analysis report window. We have the ability to show component detail. If we use this selection and run the report, now we're not just focusing on the item itself, but even the individual components and component type are displayed for us as well. So not just the California King bed, I can see the 3 individual components that comprise the bed, 2 merchandise and a single freight that make up that total value. So I'm taking the profitability and cost price analysis all the way down to the constituent component level. Design Manager tracks cost and prices all the way down to each minute component and component type entered into the software. With that concept, I have the ability to exclude certain component types. Let's imagine that I always simply pass freight on to my client. I don't mark it up, I don't do anything with it, so I don't want it distorting my profitability. So I could choose to exclude freight from my analysis. And now we're only seeing merchandise components as compared to running it with the freight listed. So you can exclude any of the particular component types that you may want to. You may just want to focus on labor or design time. You can do all of that from here as well by selectively excluding the types that you don't want. Okay, now let's see. We have a few other options here. Sales category summary and location summary. This is going to show one line per location within the project, or per sale, or per sales category within the project. And of course, some of the other options for us are no longer applicable. So the location summary is still going to group by project, but one line per location. So if I don't want to get down to the item level or component level and want to focus on the profitability on a per location level, bam, there you go. Very easy way to get the same information in a much more summarized format. Finally, project summary. Now we're looking at one line per project. And there we go. So now we've gone all the way back to the top-down view where I'm looking at my profitability, my current profitability of each of my projects on a single line. Awesome way to look at that in a quick way as well. Profit analysis, really popular report, very, very important, and one of the best ones to keep in your back pocket, that's for sure. Okay, a few more. How about we jump over to the project profit and loss? This is essentially an income statement or a profit and loss or a P&L statement on a per project basis that can further be narrowed down to a particular date range, or quite honestly, a fiscal date range. Provided the project has progressed into stages where actual bills from the vendors have been received and recorded and the client's begun to be invoiced, etc., the report can really show your gross and net income at an account level. Let's take a look. We have to select a single project for this report. We'll take one of the Carter's projects, and I'll go ahead and run this. I'm going to move my starting fiscal month all the way back to the beginning of time to see the entire fiscal activity of the project. The suppress zero accounts basically says don't show me any of my sales or cost of goods sold accounts, etc., that don't have an amount in them. Why show a bunch of accounts that all have zeros? And there we go. Very similar, almost identical to our classic income statement format, but on a project level. So I can see the fiscal month range that I've selected and each of the sales or revenue accounts that I've invoiced the client for, the corresponding cost of those products that I've sold in my cost of goods sold. The difference between those two totals is our gross profit. Any operating expenses, in other words, any project-related miscellaneous expenses that I join back would be shown for us in our operating expenses, and then I could see my total net income as well. So now I'm focusing not at all on item by item basis, but on the actual accounts that were affected by recording vendor invoices from my vendors on purchase orders and ultimately invoicing my client. I could then narrow it down a bit. I just showed the lifetime of the project, but I could, let's see how much activity has gone into, the current fiscal month. So now just looking at April activity, I can see the sales cost that I've recorded and profit just of that month for this particular project. Really powerful report. Okay, excellent. Moving on, very similar. That's a project profit and loss, or i.e. an income statement on a project level per project. Well, what if I want to see it for all projects? Just jump over to the profit and loss by project summary report. This is perfect for high level analysis of the profitability at the financial level for each project over a set period of time. I've got a few formats here that we'll look at momentarily. And again, I have a fiscal month selection. Let's pop that guy back to history and see what we can see. Now I'm taking that information that I just saw on my project profit and loss and combining it into a single line where I can see the project and client, the sum of my revenue, the sum of my cost of goods sold, the gross profit, again, any project related expenses would appear here, and the net income for each one. So just like we saw our profit analysis at the project summary level, now we're seeing the projects at an account level. So much of the specifications that we saw didn't have vendor invoices recorded yet or no actual cost, and did not have been invoiced to the client. So there wasn't a lot of fiscal activity, which is represented in this report as well. And then we have a few ways to view it. I could do so by the manager, where I break on a project manager level, and I can even sort it by revenue if desired as well. So I would see all of my top producing or top income projects first, and then look at them as they go down in profitability over time. Great report. Basically, an income statement or P&L on a per project basis, one line per project, really good for top-down analysis. So we looked at profitability on a specification level, on an account level. Let's think about status as it pertains to cash coming in and out into our company for a particular project. That's going to lead us to our project order cash flow report. This is going to show funds coming in from the client in the means of deposits, retainers, and payments on invoices, and then going out as we pay vendor deposits and vendor invoices. This just takes a single project. Let's grab one of our Carters here, and we'll go ahead and run that guy. Right away, The project cash flow summary. Quite honestly, sometimes this is all I run the report for because it is so condensed and easy for me to understand. Let's take a look what this means. It's going to show all of our funds coming in. We can see deposits on proposals, payments on invoices. If this particular project had any retainers entered, they would be listed here as well. Funds coming in, funds going out. What payments do we make on deposits and invoices for our vendors, and even purchases we put to our credit card, because that doesn't affect our cash right away, but it certainly should be affecting our cash in the future. So if we think about it, I may have tons of money coming into the bank from a variety of projects, but you still want to monitor on a per project basis because you don't want one project sort of absorbing all of the hit, like spending all of our money on project X while getting none of those funds in. Really helpful for an overall cash flow management. So then we can look at our cash flow summary. Then the body of the report breaks down that information, starting with our client retainers and deposits. So here we can see our 3 deposits on each of the purchase orders, the date that it occurred, the type represents deposit. If it was a retainer, it would say RET, the description, the cash receipt transaction that corresponds, the client check number or payment method, and the deposit that we've received. Next, we go into payments on invoices. So we can see the invoice created, the invoice number, how much the invoice was, the net, and the balance due of that invoice. No deposit on invoice 10,000. But right away, we can see a payment, a cash receipt payment on that invoice, which then reduces our running balance due back down to 0. Then we see 3 subsequent invoices, the gross invoice amount, the application of each of those deposits, the net invoice. None of those have yet been paid, and we can see our running balance due. In other words, our current accounts receivable for this particular project, and we have no deposit or retainer available because everything that we've received as a deposit has been utilized. That's our funds coming in. Now we can see our funds going out, first as vendor deposits. Here we see quite a bit of vendor deposits, the purchase order in question, the deposit transaction itself, the vendor, the transaction thereof, the deposit amount, and our running balance due. And in many of these cases, we immediately see a check being generated. That's the payment, reducing that running balance due down to 0. And that occurs time and time again for many of our deposits until we get down to the final entry, which is actually a credit card payment for Cravit. So our deposit and payment occur simultaneously, which is always the case on this report when a credit card is used to pay the vendor. And the same goes for our vendor invoices. We can see the vendor invoice number, INV represents vendor invoice type, the date, vendor, the transaction number of the vendor invoice, how much it was, the application of the deposit, the net invoice, and a running balance due. And we can see that happens a few times. Finally, we have an invoice for Bungalow, which we then pay with a check. That brings our balance due back down to the sum of our first 2 invoices. And finally, we have a variety of vendor invoices all paid via credit card as well. So then we can see the total of our gross invoices, the application of all the deposits, the net invoices, payments that we've made, and our current accounts payable, or the money we still owe on this project to date. And we can even see any miscellaneous project-related expenses here as well. In other words, operating expenses that I've joined back to the project. Fantastic report to track funds coming in, funds going out, and one of the few reports that summates both accounts receivable, cash receipts, and invoice information, along with vendor information on a per project basis. So basically, if you need any transaction about a particular project, you can go here and get all that information. Lastly, right above that is our project cash allocation. This may be one of the more conceptually difficult reports to absorb, which is perhaps why I saved it for last, but this is going to show us cash flow on a per item basis and per project basis, including more sophisticated considerations such as future payments, sales tax payments, etc. This report can often answer the question, the what money is mine question that our client support team will often hear. That's an interesting question because it's far more difficult than it seems, because it's quite difficult to see when a $100,000 retainer comes in and you're going to eventually owe sales tax and all those other things. How much of that is yours? It's a quite difficult question, quite honestly. But this report can actually make it a little bit clearer. So let's take a peek. We've got a few formats here. We can list the items by sales category. We can list the items by location, and we have a project summary version as well. Let's do it by location, which seems to be one of the more popular ways to do so. We have a variety of ranges. We'll run this guy just for one of the Carter's projects. And let's see what's available for us. Make that guy a bit bigger. And let's take a moment to go through all of these columns for us. Again, as there is some interesting concepts listed for us. So I'm seeing all of my items for the particular Carter's Pennington home project, grouped by location and subtotal by location, the reference number, the description. Then we have our estimate frame. This is the cost that I typed in and the price that I've calculated or typed in, along with the appropriate sales tax. That's very easy. So is cash. This is any deposits that I've received from the client on those goods and any payments on invoices that I've received as well. The total will be the sum of those two values. Then we get into the idea of the current allocation, which is going to be what we have actually paid the vendor and actual sales tax that we've accrued. So I thought that I'd be paying the vendor $2,024, but I ultimately ended up paying them $2,100. I thought my sales tax to the client would be $184.95, but it was actually $195. Sales tax is included in there because I may have gotten a deposit on that sales tax, but that money's not mine, certainly. There's going to be some tax authority that will want that returned to them in the near future. We have the total and then the profit. And in this case, the profit is really representing the total cash received less the total current allocation. In this case, I'm in a cash negative basis. The estimated future allocation is our best guess originally to what we would be owing, how much we thought we'd owe the vendor, and if it is currently more, then we'll show that value, what we thought sales tax would be, and the total. And again, that cash position of that total versus what we've received so far. At the end of the project, our current allocation is our actual true allocation amount. So then we can see all of those values for each of the particular items and also subtotal by location and by project, and a grand total at the bottom as well. We have options here where we can include items with no cash received. By definition, the report is the project cash allocation report. So we want to see how an item affects us when cash is received. I could use this option to include items that don't have any cash yet, but it can be considered to distort the report itself. I can use my show full description as well. Looking at the project summary, oops. Now I have one line per project, seeing how the project's progressing in that concept of cash flowing in and out. So I can see my net cash. I'm putting out more money right now, or I'm anticipating putting out more money right now than I've received in. Well, I've gotten $21,000 in deposits and $1,900 and change in payments, but I have much larger considerations on what I'm going to be having to send out. Here's the question though, or here's the good news in the future. When I look at my total estimated price and my sales tax, let's say it's roughly 46,000, I know that I've got about double of the cash coming in the future. So that's going to wildly swing my cash at the tail end into the positive value, much more to my liking. So as quite commonly may occur, I could be putting out more money right now than getting back in, but that's going to start flipping around as I get more payments on my invoices out there, etc. Really fantastic report to dig down into the line by line or item by item concept of how much cash am I making off of this item, or what is this item costing me right now, or what should I be receiving as a positive cash flow in the future on it, excluding things like sales tax, because that's not really my money. And then we can even break it down into a very linear, easy to see and observe per project basis as well. Great report, and very well worth reviewing in your time. Now, that gets us towards the end of our discussion today. I said I would circle back on a few resources that I touched upon, so let me quickly do that. Over back on our YouTube channel, there were a few areas that I had tangentially discussed. One, we talked about proposals. I talked about changing the name on proposals, about additional deposit requests, those types of things, all of which go into great detail on our Project Management Course 1, titled Proposals. I talked about a lot of things with retainers and deposits, manually allocating deposits, how Design Manager handles and does that itself, all taken care of and discussed in great detail in our Accounting Course 1, Client Deposits and Retainers. I talked about our client returns and credits, a fantastic window that we've crafted just for the interior design world to really make those complex accounting scenarios of refunding or returning from the client as easy as possible, all listed for here as well. And that brings us to the end of our somewhat lengthy discussion on profitability, tracking of a project, status of a project within Design Manager. We saw that how ProCloud really provides a multitude of ways to track the status of projects and their specifications and proposals for profitability, for finances, for cash flow, etc. I really tried to focus on specific and often unrealized windows and reports that make project review and oversight a much simpler task. And with that, I thank you for joining the discussion today, and I hope you attend another of our free webinars in the near future. Take care and have a great day.